Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. My name is Infantry Pulse, and today we're going to be going through the top 5 infantry dagger units. Now, there is a great deal of variety within the dagger class. It's one of the best weapon classes in the game in terms of inheritable weapons. You have the Hardy Bearing daggers, you have Ouch Pouch, you have all kinds of things. You have things like Courtly Fan, which give you a null follow-up effect. There's lots of really great things. So really most dagger units are going to want just a great stat line, but there are a few preferred weapons that do stand out and a few stat lines that do stand out. So that's what we're going to be going over in this video. We've already done all of the traditional weapon triangles, swords, lances, axes. We've done all of the tomes, all of the different colored tomes, and on Thursday we did bows as well. So today we're doing daggers, tomorrow we're gonna do infantry staves, and then next week we'll be tackling dragons and beasts, which will be a fun time for sure. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of that content. Give the video a like if you enjoy watching this kind of thing, and without further ado, let's get into it.
This dance is surprisingly difficult to get just right.
So first up we have Hoshidan Summer Xander. Now, Xander himself is not a particularly outstanding unit. He has kind of a lopsided stat line, but that's actually a positive here and why he's making this list. So because he has a super high defense stat, he can avoid isolation by Milla. Milla isolates units based on a defense differential. And if you run something like this with Chill Defense on him, he has a very, very good matchup in that differential versus Milla. So most of the time he will not be, almost all the time actually, he will not be isolated by an enemy Milla, which is very, very good for you because that means you can actually use your dancers, right? So Milla is the anti-dancer, but Xander is one of the answers to that, along with Dancing Berkut and Dancing Eldigan. Those are the other two units that have enough defense to really overcome Milla. Also, a well-built defensive Olivia can maybe overcome most Millas, but that's maybe in most, right? So this Xander is much better at that. I've shown a Dragon Slasher build to get that dragon effectiveness against Milla herself, but also to prevent any kind of cheesy vantage strategies. So that's why I've chosen that. You could also go with something like Ouch Pouch. That's a very good one to pre-charge his special. This is meant for an Infantry Pulse team, obviously, but being an infantry, and not being a high defense dancer, just gives him a ton of utility in the Dark Season broadly, whether using him on Infantry Pulse or not.
If you're gonna ask me to fight, it better be a massacre worthy of my time!
Coming in at number 4, we have the Mad King himself, Gangrel. So Gangrel is an interesting unit because he's not a dagger unit in the game, but he is a dagger unit in Fae. Probably to get the Levin sword in there, that is kind of his signature weapon. So he has the Levin dagger in Fae, which is actually a really strong weapon. Gangrel has a good stat line, actually a quite good stat line, where he has a lot of speed, decent attack, and then kind of good bulk as well. He's kind of an all-around good unit, well-allocated unit. He's also a Grail unit, which means he's easy to obtain for the most part. He's also being rerun right now if you want to go and grab yourself a copy of him. But yeah, so Gangrel is a good tank. You could also use him as a vantage unit, right? He can do that well, but I think being a null follow-up tank is really great. He gets true damage and extra stats if the opponent is debuffed in any way, which he can take care of himself with his dagger. But you can also use something like Tamari Air to debuff enemies in advance. So with those two things in mind, he gets the extra stats and the true damage based on his res. With those two things in mind, he can dish out a great deal of damage while also having pretty good bulk overall. So Gangrel is just a really good tank unit, especially for the light season, but also he can work in Astra as well. I think he's overlooked a lot of the time. Not really sure why. I think he can definitely, if you use a build that's similar to this, he can really do some serious damage to opponents and really counter a lot of meta threats for sure.
A ninja should remain in shadow until she is summoned.
Next up is Kagero. So I've actually covered Kagero previously in the best Aether Raids defense units for free-to-play players, and she's still holding up to this day. That was a couple months ago. She's still holding up for sure. She is for sure one of the best Dagger Infantry units in the game because of her preferred weapon and its Refine. So her preferred weapon and Refine give her extra stats, extra attack and speed, basically a Swift Sparrow, but also give her damage reduction on the opponent's first hit. You combine that with something like Sturdy Impact, which means they're only going to get a first hit, barring things like null follow-up, obviously. But that means that she is going to not take a lot of damage and live quite often. She also has pretty decent bulk. She just lives a lot of engagements generally. She's just a really strong unit in that aspect. She has a very high attack stat for a ranged dagger, for a ranged unit on defense, and she has low HP, which is good because that means she can receive a lot of infantry pulses and pre-charge something like a Dragon Fang or like an Ignis, whichever one you prefer. In this specific build, Dragon Fang does do more damage. You could also run something like Astra, for example, or an AoE special even if you wanted to. But all of those things, super, super great, super powerful on Kagero, truthfully. And she is just a very hard to kill on either phase, really, unit that dishes out a ton of damage that's readily available to players that want to build her.
So much death. How exciting.
Number 2 is one of my personal favorite units in Fae, and that is Kranja. So Kranja has a reverse vantage effect on her weapon, where if the opponent is damaged, she gets to attack first on the enemy phase. So you combine that with something like Special Spiral, makes her really easily firing off attacks onto the opponents, and can just sweep entire teams with fair amount of ease, yeah? Even if she does end up taking a hit from an opponent, she has decent bulk to work with. She has 33-35 defenses on this build that you're seeing, and she can really do some damage. She also has a good deal of speed. That's probably her strongest stat is her speed, and she's getting extra speed from her weapon as well. Now, this is Fatal Smoke Kranja, which I think is the superior Kranja, truly. So with Fatal Smoke, you can prevent your opponent's healing towers from going off. You can prevent your opponent from using things like Restore or what have you. So Kranja keeps her opponents at low health. Now with a Bolt Tower going off, and then you combine that with things like Halloween Hector or Fallen Takumi to deal even more passive damage to your opponents, Kranja is going to be dealing with opponents she only really needs to do 1 damage to, and firing off a Ruptured Sky in a lot of cases. So she is just a very, very powerful unit, and one that has become less popular as of recent, which is actually good for Kranja players, because it means less and less people are carrying Hardy Bearing on their defense teams. And so because of that, you can run Kranja much, much more often. Now, alternatively, you could run something like Null Sea Disrupt in her B slot, which is actually really good to counter a lot of the healers that are running around a lot lately. And you could run Miracle in her special as well. Those are all great options. This is just the build that I personally run and I see a lot of success with, especially recently. She has really become my predominant Astra Season carry. So now we're going to get into some honorable mentions, and first up is Julian with a Broadleaf Fan Vantage set. Now this is an inheritable weapon, so any dagger can use this, and the budget option is Matthew for sure, but Julian has the best offensive stat spread of the daggers, so I chose to make Julian the honorable mention here for this Broadleaf Fan set. He has super high attack. The idea here is that you just go in, you hit something, and with Broadleaf Fan debuffing defense and res, and then attack and speed smoke coming in afterwards to debuff those stats as well, your opponent is getting -7 to all of their stats, and then they're going to get hit with a massive attack on Broadleaf Fan. Pretty hard to deal with Broadleaf Fan. So the way Broadleaf Fan works is kind of like a reverse Blade Tome, where it adds damage to your attack based on the opponent's debuffs. So a set like this is really, really strong. Running something like Miracle helps him survive as well. You could also run something like Moonbow, Ruptured Sky, whatever you really want to do there. Alternatively, you could lose Attack Smoke and Speed Smoke in the Seal and C slot and run a Tamari Dagger as your support unit to debuff enemies in advance. I think that's also a really good option. Overall, Broadleaf Fan Vantage is just a really good set. It gets hard countered though by things like odd recovery, so you really gotta watch out for stuff like that. Next we have Summer Dorothea. So this is a Summer Dorothea built for offense and to be a Tamari Dagger, as we've been talking about in the past couple units. So a Tamari Dagger debuffs an opponent's attack and speed based on a res differential. So that's really good for Aether 8's offense because you want your opponents to be slow and weak. So this is doing that very efficiently. So running something like Sabotage Defense in the B slot also means that she's debuffing your opponent's defense on a differential. If you're using a res-based carry, a dragon or a tome unit, then you can also run Sabotage Res in her B slot. This is a set that's commonly run on Tethys. Tethys has a good stat line for this, but Dorothea just has straight up better offenses, and so she does make the better Tamari Dagger Dancer at max investment. But again, a budget version of this with a Tethys does extremely well, and it is actually something I use to support my male Morgan. Finally, for our honorable mentions, we have Flora. So Flora is an interesting unit with a very weird effect on her dagger. So her dagger effect grants her plus 20, a huge amount, plus 20 defense if her opponent is a melee unit, right? So a dagger, not a dagger, a sword, lance, axe, beast unit, right? So if they are a physical melee unit, she gets plus 20 defense. And then on top of that, if they can counter, so if they have distant counter or the like, she gets an auto follow-up. Those two things combined actually make her a decent unit, but it makes her pretty inconsistent overall. Very inconsistent. It makes her super weak against things like a Norn or a Shinon that you might see on offense, where they are a physical unit and will hit her defense, but will not trigger the plus 20 defense auto follow-up conditions. So here I've opted for Mirror Impact to stack her res. You could also go with Sturdy Impact, that's also an option. It gives her a little bit a better matchup against things like bows, but this is going to be more consistent against ranged tanks in general. So this is going to stack her res up pretty high for a very, very hard-hitting Glacies. And then if the opponent does have those two conditions met, they're a physical melee unit with distant counter, then she gets the auto follow-up and can hit really hard again. So overall, a very powerful but somewhat inconsistent unit, and that's why she is in the honorable mentions, is because of that very hard-hitting power. But again, it's only sometimes.
I'm a spy. Everything I do is dangerous.
And the #1 infantry dagger unit in Fae, infantry dagger unit in Fae is Layla. So Layla is one of just the most ridiculous units in the game. So the way she works is if she's within 2 spaces of her support partner, then she is going to be able to have a fire soup effect on her weapon, and then after combat she's going to have an automatic swap with her partner. It's just very, 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 very strong. So she can take out just one unit on the front line that may be problematic, and then she can set up her friends, whatever that may be. Being an dagger unit, that also gives her disarm trap, so she can go in and take out a pesky bolt trap that might be in your way, and then set your tank up for success, set your vantage unit up for success, set your Gale Force strategy up for success. All of these things just work super, super well for her. And she can retreat and get to safety pretty easily, honestly. So she's just a very, very good unit. I've shown her with Flashing Blade Moonbow. That can help her cut through some of the more thick frontliners that maybe she has trouble with, but honestly she has such a great attack stat and such a great speed stat that she doesn't often have problems with those type of things. But for sure, easily, by far, the best infantry dagger unit in the game. And that is the video, guys. I hope you guys have all enjoyed it. Tomorrow, remember, we're coming back to do the infantry staff units, so make sure to tune in for that video as well. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a like. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's also a link to the Discord in the description down below, There's lots of great people there helping each other out with Aether Raids things. It's also where I stream my personal Aether Raids offense plays, so if you want to come and get some good high-tier content for Aether Raids, that's also a place to watch as well. Thank you guys for watching this video. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!